Dumelang bagaetsho, re le amogela mo lenaneong la rona le bitswang Rise. We have instances when we are sad and stressed, but when should one actually start to worry about such feelings? Tonight, we are speaking about depression. This is a very heavy subject, ladies. Welcome to the show again, of course, by the way.
Thank you very much.
And, but before we start off this conversation, and our team went out and we asked some young women some questions about what they think depression is.
I think depression is when you have to deal
Well, to me, depression is when a person is isolated from other people, just sleep. You feel like life no longer has a meaning, so you prefer to be alone.
You just live in this dark cloud or state of being.
It's another level of stress of psychological health. Maybe it can be talked through, and some medication can be taken.
Because in colored families, like my mom would always be like, drink maripollo. And she'd even be like, easy panados, and she'd put it by my bedside table, because to them it's like, it doesn't exist once again. They don't know how to deal with these things, so they rather take the tough approach to it.
I don't think us black people have got much information about depression, what it is, how can you handle it.
Because as you say about I'm depressed. Like ask come up and don't like because it about long as a girl away don't know. I'm not dishing alone there all the stuff about.
I have suffered from sadness that I couldn't explain. I didn't understand it. And I was in denial about it for a very long time. Until someone said, maybe you should just consider the option. Because like in colored families, the Bastani, we believe in as Itiopla, sorteer dat uit, get over it.
I was going through a breakup. We dated for 4 years at university, and then he broke up with me the last year. And yeah, I was drinking a lot of wine, but I didn't get to the pure version.
There's depression that you can sort out yourself. There's a state where you need someone else's perspective, and then there's clinically depressed where you just cannot lift your mood, the way you need medication, and that's a very far extent. But when you're on that treatment and when you sort out the root of the problem, I believe it can be sorted.
Yes, it can be treated, but it needs a psychological treatment. Something
First step, I think you should rather talk to someone you trust. If that person doesn't help you, and then you go to the second step two. Step 2 can be like a doctor or whatever. Then the doctor can prescribe maybe some medication and all of that.
Well, go na le ba ba itshwereng and go na le ba ba sa itshwarang. Mara ke batla go itse from lona gore have you ever experienced such sadness or depression or know somebody who's had an extreme case of one or the other?
I've got a thyroid problem, and part of it and it wasn't diagnosed for years.
Right.
And in fact, some of the symptoms I had were depression. I had to be put on depression medication. Because I think when I look at my pictures, I really do look like a miserable person.
But at the same time, they've never been sad.
Absolutely.
The difference is sadness is thing, but depression when that sadness refuses to go away, is consistent over a period of time. Sadness probably triggered by something that happens, but you can get over it. Whereas depression, whether that there's been a cause of it, and there isn't necessarily a trigger, for it. It's just a chemical and physical feeling where you just do not know what to do with yourself and you cannot snap out of it as most people would like you to.
And the thing is, as personally, I also struggled with differentiating with sadness, depression. Now I went through a breakup, and the first thing I could think of was, yo, I'm depressed.
Do we all use that word into those words interchangeably? And I think in Lebo because depression is a really, really serious condition. So you can't be like, hey, bang lahlile ke depressed, you know?
Definitely a lack of knowledge. Depression, and that's why it's a problem also. Hokera support wholly depressed because like the family tsa gago ga di tsore depression ke like omong o se buile mo inseteng gore ya mo go ka tla rona ko family ya rona wa ro depressed ba tlo re engwanyana wa tefa ya no, you know, so o ya go ka and stuff. That is definitely a problem.
Mara ke taba ya gore wa itse ke the way bophelo bo leng boima ka teng ha re ka nnela ra utlwella bothatanyana o molemo wa itse nna ke ikutlwela e tlo ba taba ya gore a iswa mo because you have to be really, really strong as a person. Another thing ke gore we have not historically had those services in many communities. So ga o no sa tloela gore nkgono wa ga go kila ya ko ngakeng ba maraba rona le depression wa mmona e treatiwa e overcomeiwa, how will you know about it?
Mara ke re ke ntse gape le re tlola re bua ka yona mo showing about everything, shame, which also leads to stigma about depression. I've had depression before, and a lot of people, I suppose, how do you know then the difference between I'm sad and I'm depressed? All I can say is you will know it because it feels like nothing you have ever experienced in your life.
Into that I've heard abantu abadala bayisho ukuthi musadu thwara thipa ka bohaleng. It's like you're supposed to suffer, you're supposed to feel that way, and when you feel that way uzaba stronger, so mntana mqina. You know, you don't even know ukuthi fanele ukuthi uthini, fanele ukuthi uye kubani, fanele ukuthi uthathe ini, uyitreata kanjani. We don't know about it.
Yeah, indeed. Momorago ga papatso, we will be joined by Bonnie Mbuli to speak more about her autobiography titled Eye Bags and Dimples.
Reale amogela gape gompieno re etetswe ke Bonnie Mbuli o tlile go tlotla le Kgomotso le Khanyi ka buka ya gagwe le ka botshelo jwa gagwe le depression. Over to you guys.
Thank you very much, Sis Lebo. Bonnie, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Ke gopola hane ke fetsa bala buka ya gago. I think ke go tweetile ke like, oh my goodness, oh my goodness.
I was so excited.
I really, because I ke badile ka matsatsi a mararo.
Wow.
I couldn't put it down because it was so compelling. Go tlile yang gore o decide gore ngwale buka e?
Wow, I was desperate. I needed an outlet. I needed to be heard. I needed it to legitimize what had happened to me because nobody around me could validate it.
Sure.
You know, and even the people who were involved in the pain, when I did speak to them about it, they were very dismissive of it or in denial. And so I just needed many people to hear the story. And it just gave me the legs to stand and I could move on.
How did it feel being misunderstood by the world so much?
At the time, I couldn't even differentiate between a misunderstanding of myself and that the world was misunderstanding me as well. So there's something wrong with me. I had to be separated into something is medically wrong with me, or is there something just wrong with my existence? And then having to overcome there's nothing wrong with my existence, there's nothing wrong with me, but there's something medically wrong with me, so I have a condition.
When did you know that it's medically wrong instead of there's something wrong with me?
When I finally could feel, no man, like there are things that are happening in me physically that I can't control, like panic attacks. Like waking up and not being able to get out of bed for at least 2 hours. But it was really the panic attacks that led me to a place of desperation, of like, oh shucks, this is gonna take my life.
Go kwala buka le go bua le mama gago ka depression, how has it affected the relationship ya lona?
In my legitimizing my story, I legitimized my mom's experience. When I was diagnosed, I went to her and I said, Mama, can I leave clinical depression? And I'm going to go on medication. And she said, what is it? And I told her the symptoms. And she said, oh, I have that. I've always had that. And I said to her, oh, wow, like, oh, That was like another like opening in my life, like, oh my gosh. Then I was like, okay, we can get help together. And it was like, for her, it was like, no, you do it, it's cool.
I
found a way.
Sort of
But you found
from
relief,
it, exactly.
yes.
And then like, we are getting relationships with other people in your book and how they were wounded by depression. Were you able to mend them, and how did you mend them?
I think some things are just water under the bridge, and some are meant to remain in your life and walk with you, you know. Some experiences rather, and some people were just for that season, and others, you know, need to remain in your life, and and you need to work at those relationships. I can't think of anybody I'm still estranged from as a result of how I was behaving, because I wasn't necessarily aggressive or nasty or malicious in my way. I was just very withdrawn. I had a sense of, I don't need people, I'm self-sufficient, I must never be found wanting.
How can the people around you support people who are clinically depressed?
Yeah, I think the first thing is to not to be accusatory about the way that they are. You know, because a lot of us, when we're around somebody that we can feel is very depressed and has a low energy all the time, then we say, just cheer up, man. Just get over it. Hey, when I'm so you know, we must always feel sorry for you. So it's about not, you know, accusing and making them feel like they're already doing something wrong, because they're already suffering. You know, like pointing fingers just intensifies it. And it's about creating safety. Creating a safe environment where they can actually come out and say, guys, something's wrong, and help me.
So, Bonnie, ke batla bua ka depression as a cultural taboo. So, ke batla etsa from an extract in your book. It says that I did begin to suspect that I might be depressed, but I didn't know where to begin to tackle such an issue. My cultural disposition and worldview couldn't allow this train of thought. I'd never known a black person who was feeling depressed. My cultural legacy demanded that I stop feeling sorry for myself. Things were far worse for most black Africans, and I didn't know, and I didn't have to look far for proof. Black people didn't sit around bemoaning their misfortune. They were professional sufferers and just kept doing what they had to do. I remember when I read this, I was like, yep, that's us.
Professional sufferers. I like that.
Black sufferers.
Strong
yes,
black
strong
woman. It's almost
black
like it comes
woman.
together.
Why was it so important for you to spark this conversation, and also as a black woman?
I was tired of the suffering, and I was tired of being a martyr, you know? And it was killing me. Essentially, it was actually drawing my life force from me, you know? I wanted to so desperately heal, and I wanted to so desperately let everybody else know that there was an opportunity to heal. Even Kontlung, when you say, I'm not feeling this, I'm not feeling that, it's like, yeah, we all have problems.
You took your stuff, you put it on paper, everybody read it. And then what is the response? What has the response been? Has it been better or worse or surprising?
But the response has been overwhelmingly positive.
Right.
The negatives were like tiny in comparison.
Right.
Yeah.
And then khotsa medication
You know what taking medication was like for me? It was as if I broke my leg and I put on a cast so that my bones could heal and find a way to put themselves together again. And then I could take off the cast and teach myself how to walk.
Yeah. On that note, Ms. Mbuli and your fabulous self. I can't wait to see what the future holds, and thank you very much for coming to share the story with us.
Awesome.
And I hope everybody watching will read this book. It is really quite beautiful and very useful, and it could be a great way to spark conversation for yourself and your family. Don't go away. We'll be back right after this break. And Teboho Monyamane from the South African Depression and Anxiety Group. Don't go away. We've done a little switcheroo. Lebo and Mbali are joined on the couch by our next guest, Teboho Monyamane from the South African Depression and Anxiety Group. Over to you.
Thank you, Kgomotso. Teboho, welcome. Can you please tell me about SADAG?
All right, so the South African Depression and Anxiety Group is an organization that was founded approximately about 20 years ago, and we try to help people with depression, anxiety, and other forms of mental health problems. The South African Depression Anxiety Group provides telephonic counseling, it provides support groups, and also does a lot of outreach and tries to raise awareness about different mental health issues.
In depression and maybe the symptoms that are in depression.
So how do we work depression? We work something in a few symptoms. Some symptoms are psychological, behavioral, emotional. So Rishaba, a change in someone's behavior and emotions over time. So some of the common symptoms are feeling sad or low, being very tearful, isolating yourself from other people. With some people, they become irritable. With other people, you find the changes in sleeping patterns, changes in eating, weight gain or weight loss. There are also changes in energy levels. So you feel tired all the time. Before, to be around your friends and family. There are those kinds of changes. So your mood is low for 2 weeks or more, then you start getting worried that it might be depression.
And sister, I struggle with sadness and depression. Angazi ukuthi yini differences. When I'm sad, I often tend to ukuthi I'm depressed khona manje. Ngicela ukuthi ngiexplainele ukuthi yini difference khona lapho.
And it's very common hore sometimes when we're sad we just say I'm so depressed. That thing is so depressing. You know, but there's a difference between sadness and depression. So anyone can feel sad due to anything that can come up in your life that makes you feel sad. But when we're talking about depression, we're talking about those symptoms that I mentioned, 5 or more of those symptoms for a period of at least 2 weeks or longer.
How do you get help from SADAG?
Okay. So SADAG, Italy telephonic counseling. So if Usadzibi were to start, you can call SADAG. We have 2 lines. There's a toll-free number as well that you call SADAG, open from 8 in the morning to 8 in the evening. So when you don't know where to start and you're feeling stuck and you just need some help, you can just pick up the phone and call SADAG. So there's no specific membership or way of joining, you just pick up the phone.
Okay. But where are these services in our communities, and then what can a person do? How so those services?
One thing I didn't mention as well, we also have a list of different kinds of professionals, counselors, psychologists in different parts of the country. So, let's say, Kemo Free State, and someone then renale a resource book where we can look and see around the area Momutuali. And another thing, actually a lot of our public hospitals and some of our public clinics, let's honor dinali a counselor or psychologist, but sometimes
so how do you make the community ibe supportive to depression?
I think interior awareness is so important because a lot of stigma around depression and any kind of mental health problem. And when it comes to the individual, familia high depression to check as a psychologist I tried the tools to be able to communicate what they need from their family, because I think that's often a difficult thing, and sometimes and often we can't impose that. So I can't go to someone's house or someone's family members and say, listen, you need to understand what this is, unless Bona Batla to my office and want a family meeting where I can explain. Okay. But working limo to alimung the individual and that those tools to be able to express from their loved ones and their family members.
Now let's come back to young people. In age depression, I mean, how many young people are you seeing banali depression? And most importantly for me, even if basatlikolo nasadek, are youth taken seriously banali depression?
Yeah, youth depression doesn't discriminate with age either. So Ranake batho babanyane as well who are getting depression. Libana can get depression even before adolescence, before they're teenagers. And your question was, Hurina, are they taken seriously? If you think about the teenage years, for example, I'll use that period. Hangata, you know, kinako e mutu ulegang to find yourself or understand yourself as now going from the childhood age to an adult age, and itlali into thingata, itlali also hormonal changes, or sometimes ubali the moods, ubali this and that, and sometimes when teenagers are depressed, they might express it differently. So they're not always going to be very sad. Some will be very irritable and seem very angry, and sometimes it's just taken as it's just that phase, and they'll get over it.
I read Uguti, women are more prone to depression. As a young woman, is this true?
I mean, I certainly do see more women than men who have depression, but I think another part of that as well, yes, maybe there are more women with depression, but I think another part is that, at least I'm speaking for myself, is that a lot of men who eventually come and say, I'm depressed, you know, it's usually at a much later stage, because if you think about it in a social context, a man are depression, you know.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ausi, for joining us and for the good work Eli etsang go SADAG. Le lona go ga ile skela le bala gore re tla be re le fa nomoro e Ausi a buileng ka yona e sa batleng tšhelete kgotsa metsotso, and le SADAG le ka ikrea mo Facebook information e o re tla le fa yona. Over to you, Kgomotso.
Thank you very much, Bathoba Mzansi, for joining us on today's program. Remember that there is a difference between having an off day and an off life. Only you can know when there is truly something wrong. So be self-aware. Le gopole gape gore fa dikakanyo tsa lona about today's show on Mxit Reach, Twitter le Facebook. Re tla le bona ka nako e latelang. Bye. Woof, woof.